Welcome to the February 2022 edition of the CBAN Lunch and Learn webcast. I'm Curtis Dean.
I'm John Ann Willow.
Todd Gilcock.
And we are here to talk about developments and interesting topics within the world of broadband. A little bit later on in our webcast, we have an interview with Renee Knoop, and Renee is with Consortia Consulting, a CBAN associate member. We talked a little bit last month about the Affordable Connectivity Program, and this week, or in this month's edition, Renee and I will talk about the ACP, as the acronym would have it, about how providers can become involved in the ACP and opt into that program so they can start offering the monthly subsidy that is provided to eligible households. So Renee kind of does a walkthrough for that from the provider perspective. So that'll be coming up later on in today's webcast.
That's really important. I'm really glad that Renee was able to join us this month.
Yeah, and she's already been working, Consortia has a number of clients that are in the community-based broadband space, and she's been doing this conversation with several of their clients. A lot of providers did not sign up under the emergency broadband benefit, the first wave that came out that was for COVID relief money. And so the goal is to get, now that this is a more permanent program, to get more providers adopting it so that more people can benefit from that broadband subsidy. So we'll be, I'm sure, throughout the year looking at the ACP from various angles, because it's a pretty important program to help close that digital divide for folks that have not been able to adopt yet. So just the past month or so, a lot's going on in the broadband area. John Ann, I know you've been angsting a little bit over the, shall we say, the lumpiness of states' abilities to hopefully implement the BEAD program, the Broadband Infrastructure Program, later this year. What are you seeing there?
Well, I live in the state of Michigan, and in Michigan, we have a paper broadband office. And it's a paper broadband office. That means that on paper, the legislature has created, the governor's office, mandated the broadband office, and the legislature said yes, a broadband office, but it doesn't have a door, it doesn't have any people, it doesn't have anything, and it keeps getting kicked down the road in special budget sessions and legislature sessions. And the ranking minority member, Republican member of the Communications and Technology Committee, John DeMoose, recently told myself and the Northern Michigan Center for Change that we did have a broadband office. So we were very lucky that this was stood up in 2019. And so when we were told that, we started doing some more digging. And I have been looking into just what having a broadband office means across different states, because it means lots of different things. And the long and short of it, though, is some of each state's funds will not be able to be distributed until and unless they have an administrative body inside their state legislature or inside the state that can administer these BEAD funds. So right now, where we are is about a quarter of the states still don't have broadband offices, even though they've known for 2 years. And I'm just going to tell you who they are.
Why not call them out a little bit?
I'm going to call them out.
Because people watching this webcast in those states then have the opportunity. They may not be aware that their states.
That's right. That's right. And it's important. So if I name your state, you might want to contact your legislator and find out why you don't have a broadband office yet. So if you are in Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Delaware, Hawaii, Idaho, Iowa, Michigan, Mississippi, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Jersey, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Vermont, or Wyoming, you don't have a broadband office. You might have a paper office, but you don't have anything staffed, active, and ready to do any work.
Just to push back against that a little bit, I know the list you're referring to. Iowa does have a broadband office. They just don't call it a broadband office. They have the Office of CIO,
Chief Information Officer.
Thank you, Chief Information Officer.
And are they running the broadband? Because the Pew Research Institute thinks they're not. So
that they are,
and totally possible.
I think the difference is it was an office that wasn't necessarily set up by the legislative body. It was assigned to an existing executive branch body, the OCIO office. So I mean, but that's probably part of the confusion here is defining what the office is. That's, I'm sure, something that's going to have to be worked through, and as they develop the rules for that, they'll have to figure that out.
Right, because in Michigan, the office technically exists too, and it's in LEO, which is Labor and Economic Opportunity.
Right,
it's right there, and it is there, and they have been able to push some funds out into the state, but they can't implement the whole program until it's until it's staffed and until it's programmatic. Yep. And so, do you know for a fact that, or do you know whether Iowa has that infrastructure in place inside the CIO's department?
They do. Okay. They've been administering up now 7 rounds of funding for broadband infrastructure.
That is true. I didn't know that.
Including ARPA money that just went out the door here. But I think that again brings up the definition of what is the definition of a broadband office? What is the definition of a functional broadband?
And that's where I actually had trouble getting clear information, because like you said, states are like, it's a very states' rights kind of states directive sort of thing, and everybody is doing it differently. So the mandate from the Fed is that you have to have the state administer it. The guidance is to have a broadband office. I suppose it's not mandated that it be a broadband office, but I think it's even troubling perceptually that it appears that a quarter to a third of states don't yet have one, because and that we can't get clear information about who does. So if I read your state and you're not sure, find out.
Reach out,
reach out, because if you don't have a state broadband office, there's money that will be left on the table until that's done.
Yeah. And it really brings up, we've talked the term digital divide, which is probably overused, but it's designed to show, there's some areas that have things and there's some areas that don't have things when it comes to digital inclusion and digital equity. This also illustrates how, because these funds, the BEAD funds, are going to be administered at the state level, how well each state does could show a divide between states that are doing it really well and getting better broadband to more people, and other states that maybe are not doing very well. Or what I worry about, states that are more in the pocket of the large providers than others, who are just going to administer the funds in such a way that it doesn't make the big guys unhappy.
Wisconsin's in danger of that right now. Actually, they have a really well established broadband office that's been around for years, and they do good work.
Yeah.
But I know from my time in the Wisconsin legislature that office has been over time, or at least at intervals. I haven't been in the legislature for a little bit, but AT&T, which Ameritech used to be a big phone company. They were actually based in Milwaukee. When they got purchased by AT&T, that made AT&T a strong player, like a power player in that region, because they also had that former local corporate connection.
Sure.
So AT&T, in like 2010, when they came forward and really took control of everything they could. And so
every state has dominant providers like that can overpower other providers because they have such a huge presence in deep pockets.
Yep.
The important thing about the coordinator position is that they start getting recognized within the state government as a department head level or cabinet level position, trying to coordinate, making that things happen between agencies.
Yeah.
Or just like, when we looked at Iowa legislation, it was the OCIO was going to get charged with trying to coordinate duct mapping with IDOT, the transportation. And it's like, that's not their role.
Right.
Their role is to run the computer systems of the state government, and they didn't want that role. So that's where I think the important part about establishing the offices is to raise from being nobody's problem to being a coordinating role of information.
Yeah. And that's what we're seeing a lot in Michigan is it just keeps getting kicked down the road. We've seen, I mean, I've been involved, or at least party to some pretty amusing, I'll say, email threads where, you know, we it's this breadcrumb trail to nowhere. We'll talk to this person, you know, and we keep going and everybody's like, everything's fine. Or that's not me, or you're right.
Yeah. Well, we see that at the municipal level all the time when we go into communities. Broadband is not anyone's job. Yeah. And better broadband is, you know, nobody knows where to go. So it's no surprise that it's happening at the state level either.
Yeah, not a surprise at all. It's a problem that's got to be fixed, and the clock is ticking. Depending on who you talk to or what you hear, we had just had an article in Broadband Bites about this. Those rules are being written right now on how that money can be deployed and how it can be spent. And then when those rules are written, then the states that are ready to accept those rules and accept those funds will be able to move out and start incentivizing networks and digital inclusion. States that aren't ready are going to be falling behind in that. So hopefully, I know a lot of states have their legislative session during this, like kind of the spring months, especially more rural states. Hopefully they're all back tackling this this year, this legislative session, and not just seeking to make it into a political football to gain points with.
Well, that's a really good point. Actually, we can wrap up, but this is a time when it is important. This is actually a perfect time of year to check and see what is going on with your state's broadband office, because it is budget appropriation time, and people are doing, you know, this is the time to do it. Yep. Around mid-June would be a not time, because
then it's going to be a scramble,
and ends 2 weeks after that.
Part of the challenge for these offices too is going to be staffing up, is finding people who know what they're doing to staff those offices, as opposed to saying, we're going to take employees from the Department of Education, or we're going to take employees from here. They need people that understand broadband, that understand the process, that can speak the provider's language. And those people might already be employed somewhere else. So it's going to be a real challenge, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, one of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately has been low Earth orbit satellites as far as delivering internet service. You guys know, and others watching this that know me may know, I'm kind of a space nut. So I'm really into rockets, and you know, I'm the guy that watches as many SpaceX launches live as I can. And if not, usually a couple hours later, I stream it. And you know, thank goodness that there's plenty of content creators out there on YouTube that do those. So I'm already kind of have a predilection to following this. And of course, you know, there's been a lot of attention paid to Starlink over the past couple of years, because this is SpaceX's satellite-based internet service, satellites in low Earth orbit, and a whole lot of satellites going into low Earth orbit and delivering services. So Starlink started their beta deployment of their Starlink internet here, a year and a half ago. And people in really remote areas for the first time are getting decent internet speeds. They're paying a lot for it, but they are getting good speeds. And Starlink has been continuing to launch satellites. They've been continuing to open up new areas. I believe the last statistic I saw is they have about 150,000 subscribers now worldwide, which is not a small number, but it's also just a tiny amount of the areas that probably can't get it from anywhere else. But
Tonga.
Yeah, exactly. John Ann brought to my attention a web or a podcast webcast. It's a YouTube streamer.
YouTube channel. Yeah.
So if you've never seen Answers with Joe, go to look it up on YouTube. I follow a bunch of space people on YouTube, and Joe Scott is his name. He's not a YouTube space nut necessarily, but he did have a very good episode recently about low Earth orbit satellite. And one of the things I thought was very interesting about Joe was he had this great chart in his webcast about all the different Starlink-like satellite services that are on the way. Starlink's just the first out of the gate, right? Because, hey, they own a rocket company. Easy. And, you know, so they have 1,500 satellites or so. in orbit and another 42,000 on the way, or 40,000 on the way. So they're going to go very big with this satellite constellation, but they're not the only one that's doing this. You've got Amazon, of course, has its own product called Kuiper that it will be rolling out. It was supposed to have already started by now, but they picked a rocket company that hasn't been able to deliver the rockets, so they haven't been able to launch yet. And then there's two others coming down the pike, OneWeb and Lightspeed. So there are plenty of companies out there that are looking to get into the satellite internet space. If you're interested in this particular episode of Answers with Joe, here's the URL. I'd encourage you to go check it out because he does a really nice job of explaining this. One of the things he talks about is the fact that with all of these satellites in orbit, low Earth orbit, all kind of competing for space in space, so to speak, about the impacts that are going to have beyond just delivering broadband to people out in the middle of nowhere. And one of the things he talked about was how these satellites could potentially create a debris cloud if a bunch of them start running into each other, called the Kessler syndrome, which scares the heck out of me. One way that civilization could end is through a bunch of satellites running into each other, and suddenly space is so dirty we can't launch new satellites, and then suddenly our GPSs are all gone and we lose all those things.
Yeah, basically it creates collisions. Collisions would create a garbage cloud. A
garbage cloud. It's a chain effect. Mm-hmm. One hits, and then all the debris it collects or creates hits other satellites, and pretty soon you have this big. The movie Gravity talked about that a few years ago.
Yeah, right.
Great special effects, horrible plot, but it kind of talked about that. The other thing that is very interesting, which is fears of the apocalypse for me are not aliens invading. It is, number one, Kessler syndrome, wiping out all the satellites, and it goes way beyond just internet. The other one I always concerned about is a solar storm that wipes out all the satellites, and that is actually had a definite effect lately, because the last SpaceX launch of 49 satellites that went off on that launch, 40 ended up not making to orbit because a solar storm had created issues with the ability for them to reach the higher orbit they needed to. So
now they did say that when I haven't seen anything since early yesterday, but at the time there were 49 launched, 40 coming down. They expected the other 9 to come down too.
Okay.
But their explanation was, we always launch them into this low Earth, like this very low Earth orbit first, because that's how we weed out the duds. And then once they're established and stable in this orbit, then we send them to their final orbit. But I was bothered by that too, Curtis, because each satellite weighs about 575 pounds.
Yeah.
Saying, yeah, it's normal to lose like 40 or 50 just dropping to the Earth. But they're definitely going to burn up. Nothing's ever going to hit the ground. And, you know, I'm not a scientist.
Yeah.
It could be true. But like just randomly dropping, 50, 600 pound things into the atmosphere at a time, all the time. You tell me, is that a threat? Is that worrying?
It isn't a threat to you and me. It might be a threat to the ocean.
So they are falling into the ocean. They're not breaking.
They are satellites. Modern satellite launches are designed. First of all, the satellites are designed to break up upon reentry and pretty much burn up upon reentry.
Right.
If they can't be designed to completely burn up because the materials and such, then they are designed to reenter over there's basically this part of the South Pacific where there's this huge zone where humans don't inhabit, and that's where they're supposed to go. And so, but once in a while, they can't control it. The Russians and the Chinese are really good at just ignoring those rules and just saying, it'll come down. Some comrade might get smushed, but who cares? So there's very little attention.
Did you just say that?
What's that?
Did you just say some comrade might get smushed?
Well, I'm referring to, some communists refer to each other as comrades. So
yes, I know.
But there are international rules about this, but let's just say not all spacefaring nations follow those rules as carefully as they
And some might say that given the fragile condition of the ocean, and especially the southern oceans, with the giant ice shelf about to fall off of Antarctica, risking desalination, all the currents are changing, the temperature's changing, sea levels are rising. Is it really okay? I mean, is that something we're going to have to look at eventually? Can we keep dropping this into the ocean? I know it's not the point. We don't have to stay on it.
Yeah. I guess the bigger question back to broadband is, are there going to be international companies doing this in addition to the United States companies, or is it going to
will there be,
how will they coordinate satellite providers?
It will get to the point where they can't coordinate it, right? And when those because those satellites are all using radio frequencies to beam data to and from Earth stations, right? Earth station being that dish on your side of your house. Well, those radio frequencies, although they're probably licensed, there's only so much spectrum available. We've had the same conversation with fixed wireless about, you're in an uncontrolled environment, how can you control interference? The other thing that I always think about when I think about the billions of dollars being spent to launch these satellites into orbit, how much fiber could those billions that are spent in deploying those satellites have done instead in a medium that is not subject to space radiation, is not a subject to collisions? And one of the things that Elon Musk has said is, we want to bring internet to underdeveloped countries, to places in the world where it's not accessible now, which is a very laudable goal. But the problem is, how many persons or households in undeveloped countries can afford a $500 installation and $100 a month for 100 meg internet?
Yeah, they'll have to figure out if they can resell it.
That's the thing,
So what I'm hearing is that the model is actually, for in really underpopulated areas like that, the model is for a public entity to take the account, like if the library or the school, and then either resell or make it a public place, or Wi-Fi broadcast, like rebroadcast the Wi-Fi signal.
Yep. Well, the new Starlink premium that they've announced is coming is higher bandwidth, up to 500 megabits per second download, which is fantastic. But it's $500 a month and a $2,500 installation fee. So certainly, they're in an underdeveloped country, it may be that they're going to have to pool resources and offer that and pull that down. And hopefully Starlink won't prevent them from then letting communities share that. So.
Right. No, actually, I think I did read that was a piece, like that was an expected structural piece of it.
Yeah. It'll be more like a middle mile at that point.
Right. Like, so those premium nodes that are available are understood to be for, at least in part, used by public entities.
Redistribution. Yeah.
Redistribution. Thank you.
I'm going to pull us out of orbit for a minute. Let's get back down to Earth. There are some real impacts that are going to be happening financially over the next few years with not only with all the federal money that's coming out, Todd, but that is creating some issues with supply and demand and pricing.
Yeah, the AT&T announced that they're going to miss their install goal by 500,000 customers of getting fiber to people because they don't have the supply chain. And I think people are really, as we look at systems right now that are kind of in transition, they were being planned, they've been financed. Financing the cost of those is variable. And so we have interest rates going up. Even though maybe the risk premium has come down, that people are more comfortable in lending money to build new fiber systems. Is still on a variable interest rate that is, in the last month and a half, has changed. It's not Federal Reserve policy, it's just the market rates, the way things have been going. That you can tell we had a one-time juice in the system of financing availability, a favorable lending environment, and then people start buying stuff. And so supply chains are now 52 weeks to 100 weeks in order to get things. And you're going to sit on an order and maybe have to borrow money while you're waiting on that.
Yeah.
And that becomes an upfront problem. I was just doing some rough math, and we knew there was a 15% retroactive cost increase on materials that was implemented across the whole supply chain. And that ends up being $1.25 a month on a new system for the next 20 years, just by that alone. And so then I did some more. If the labor goes up that much, you're looking at $2.50 a month. for 20 years. And then that 1% rate increase is another $3 a month for 20 years. And so all of a sudden you're at $7 a month, and people who announce, a $65 internet rate or a $70 gigabit rate are going to be looking, easily $5 a month more by the time they actually get their customers and get a bill. So, it's going to be interesting with all that. You start adding more federal dollars into it on top of this, and it just seems like everybody's getting their cut.
Except in many cases, the consumer who's
right
absorb that cost. It's like if you already are served by a fiber provider, you're probably the luckiest person.
Yeah,
because they bought that material before all the price increases. They installed it probably when labor rates were cheaper. Even if some of the components were a little more expensive 5 years ago, it's done. So you don't have to worry about that now, as opposed to, new providers that are either just launching new services or upgrading or rebuilding. They're the ones that are going to feel that squeeze.
Yeah.
It's not going to be temporary. I was at a vendor event here a couple of weeks ago, and it was fun to hear the manufacturers of fiber and vaults and other telecommunications equipment and gear dance around the topic of lead times, upcoming rate increases for cost increases. They're kind of caught in the middle, right? Because they're the ones that have to speak the bad news to the customer. But it's the whole ecosystem right now is juiced because of COVID, because of supply chain, because of computer chips, because of everybody wants stuff at the same time. Demand is high. So it's just it's an interesting period of time.
Well, and because of that too, what we're seeing more and more with small municipal utilities, not just fiber utilities, is they're re-examining this whole 20, 30-year trend towards outsourcing. It's that we're starting to see some reverse now, where people are saying, well, can I bring the equipment in-house? Can I invest in training for employees? And it's becoming a much more baked in piece of people's strategies for over the next few years. And that probably won't reverse anytime soon.
Yeah. I think that's going to be more popular even with employees because they're getting a skill set they know that actually has value.
Right.
15 years ago, everybody thought that the boring crews were going to be the most one-off job and nobody wanted to do boring, and blah, blah, blah. And now it's like everybody needs a boring crew.
Yeah.
So, and you can make really good money doing it. As an employee.
Yeah.
So I think that helps quite a bit.
And there are companies, small, probably larger companies too, but I know of several small community-based providers out there that started investing in their own construction equipment to do their own projects.
Exactly.
They're able to do those projects less expensively, but they also, with this capacity, now they're like, we can keep growing because we are going to be able to grow better, more cost effectively, or we'll set up a new company. It's all they do is outside plant telecom construction. And if we run out of projects, we'll hire ourselves out. So, it is definitely going to be an interesting landscape financially for new and existing providers in the next few years.
I think right now we're all held in thrall by how quickly the landscape is changing.
Yeah, really.
I think the first people who will adapt to it are those local utilities or the local public, political constituencies who have to keep the lights on every single day, literally and figuratively.
Right.
So they're going to be, even though it seems counterintuitive because bureaucracies are typically the slowest moving, in this case, I think they'll be the most quickly impacted and and they'll be on the vanguard of action for how we cure this or move through it.
The more local something is, likely to be the more responsive. There's always going to be exceptions to that rule, but certainly that's another case for why we all do what we do and why we're passionate about community-based broadband providers. Yes. Is because they are able to and have to respond more quickly to their consumers, because if they don't, they're going to have somebody banging on their table. So at their board meeting. All right. Well, good discussion, you guys. We're going to move on to our next segment now. A little while ago, I had the opportunity to visit with Renee Knoop. She is with Consortia Consulting, and Consortia is a proud CBAN associate member, by the way. They provide all sorts of regulatory, financial planning assistance for community-based broadband providers, municipals and non-municipals. And we talked with Renee a little bit about what it would take for a provider to participate in the Affordable Connectivity Program, the new program authorized through the federal infrastructure bill that will provide a $30 a month subsidy for households that are eligible. So we enjoyed our conversation with Renee. Here it is. Scared you, didn't I?
A little bit. That was good. That was good.
The Affordable Connectivity Plan, or ACP, is a new FCC program that provides a $30 a month subsidy for home broadband services for eligible households. Our guest today is Renee Knoop with Consortia Consulting. Consortia is a member of the CBAN associate member team. And Renee and the Consortia team help broadband providers enroll in that ACP, and they do a bunch of other stuff for small broadband providers. So Renee, I want to thank you for joining us for today's Lunch and Learn.
Thanks, Curtis.
Great to have you here.
Great to be here. Thank you.
You bet. So the ACP is the successor to the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program, and that was implemented as a response to COVID-19. Renee, what are some of from your perspective, from your chair, what are some of the key differences between that Emergency Broadband Benefit Program, which is now ended, and the new ACP, which is now in place?
Okay. Obviously, the acronyms are totally different, and so I will use the acronyms because Emergency Broadband Benefit Program
is a mouthful.
It's a mouthful.
That's
so
a total mouthful.
EBBP versus ACP. So
gotcha.
Some of the differences are there are some additional requirements in the rules that the FCC has brought down, 177-page order of rules. And so a lot of them are similar to what some ETCs are doing with Lifeline, but there are some differences. There are some additional requirements for advertising. There's going to be an annual requirement. I mean, you've got to, get this out to your households, which Lifeline subscribers are Lifeline providers are required to do that as well.
Mm-hmm.
The recertification of annual subscribers is a difference. That was not done with the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program, or EBBP, because that was a temporary program.
Right.
This is still considered a air quote temporary program, but there's more funds in this. We just don't know. It's probably not going to end as soon as what EBBP did.
And it could be reauthorized by Congress, more funds reallocated to it when that chunk runs out.
Correct.
If that happens.
Yes. And there's rumblings, at the FCC of it may go into more of the Lifeline side of it, where they get the 925. It may be transitioned into that.
I see.
Part of the program, and then the voice side would stay to be the 525. So lots of things going on at the FCC with it. Another difference is the non-payment and how that will be handled.
Okay.
Non-payment for ACP, you cannot suspend a payment or a subscriber's service until they are 90 days past due. You are required to send a 30-day and a 60-day notice. Which is a little bit different for service providers, because normally they send out a 30-day notice, and if they don't respond, their service is
right
at that time. So, and it's from the bill due date, not the bill date. So they've got to have a couple notices that come out before they can suspend their service. So it's a little bit different for them, and it's a little harder for those service providers that do bundle their packages.
Right.
Services. So, that's some
the provider
on their end.
So the provider would not be prohibited from suspending their video or voice accounts during that window, according to their regular policies. It's just the broadband, which is part of ACP, would have to continue and give them that longer grace period, so to speak.
Yes.
Do we know if they would have to restore all past due, or just the broadband part? In other words, could they keep paying just the broadband part and not the past due voice and video in order to keep their account going, or how does that work?
Yes, and you ask, yes, that's true. They can do that, and you, like, for example, let's just say that you had a subscriber that had a bill with you previously.
Yep.
They left. Now they came back and they want service again. You cannot deny them service based on that previous balance. You can work on that previous balance on a separate tract to get that paid. So you cannot deny them service.
So probably some sort of payment arrangement or some other arrangement, but you can't say, no, you have to pay the back due $50 in order to reconnect today.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah.
Good.
So those are just a few of the major differences.
And of course, one of the big differences is the amount of money that the subsidy goes to the eligible households. Was $50 under the EBB, now $30 under the ACP, except for tribal areas. And tribal areas remain at $75 a month.
That is correct. Yes. Yeah. And that's a difference. And if you were an EBBP service provider, you needed to, or are required to, inform those subscribers of this transition that's going on from EBBP to ACP, that their rate will be going to $30. And there's a 60-day transition period for this program.
So that suddenly they'll look at their bill and notice that subsidy has gone from 50 to 30. We want those consumers to know why that happened.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. You need to notify them of why that's happening. That's correct. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So we're kind of focusing on the ACP from the provider perspective today. One of the things that I had noticed is that there were providers that did not participate in the EBBP because they were, for various reasons. What were some of the reasons that you heard why maybe providers did not adopt when the EBBP was put into place?
Sure. Some of the reasons were they thought it was too temporary. I mean, it was temporary. We didn't know when it was going to end, and when the funds ran out, the funds ran out. So you didn't always know if you were going to get paid. You get your reimbursement, and you would have given the credit to the consumer. You might not get reimbursed from the Treasury for that. It's if you are a non-ETC and you've never participated in a program like this, there's a lot of administrative work to it.
Sure.
In the learning curve, if you know how to handle Lifeline on the USAC side, it's a lot easier to transition to this program.
Right.
So, and like I said, workload administratively, it's a little extra work to get everything squared away. There's a monthly template that needs to get downloaded, and it's a learning curve. Like I said.
Sure.
We haven't. Some of them said, I haven't anybody to request the program, so why do I participate in something that I don't have anybody that's really interested in receiving that credit? So those are a few of the things that we heard, but one of them was the administrative. I think they thought that it was going to be, I'm going to call it an administrative nightmare. And it's not too bad. I mean, we worked with several non-ETCs with EBBP and got them squared away. There were some bumps in the road, but they're moving along great and good. Not having any issues.
That's, you're hearing the same feedback I heard from some of the community broadband providers that are part of CBAN is it's too temporary. We don't want to get people used to this $50 subsidy, and then it gets pulled away and nothing gets replaced it. So that's why they didn't do the EBBP, but there's still that reluctance going into the ACP. I think so. Maybe set people's minds at ease as far as the providers that might be watching this. There are resources out there like Consortia Consulting to help you with that. If you are a small company and you've already got a pile this high on your desk and you don't want to make it go that high, there are people like you guys that can help them through that process, correct?
Absolutely. That is correct. Yes. And we'll do whatever we can. We'll help them with their election forms. We'll help them get set up. And if they prefer, we do have some clients that want us to enter that information into the system for them. And they just send us that information. We take care of it on a monthly basis for them. Basically, all they do is then get their reimbursement through the Treasury. And so, we'll do that for them gladly. Great. Not a problem.
Great. So We mentioned the term ITC, that's Independent Telecommunications Company. I like to, sometimes people don't get our acronyms here, but another big one was ETC, that's Eligible Telecommunications Carrier. And that essentially means a broadband provider that has participated in and signed up to participate in the Lifeline program in the past, correct?
That is correct.
So the process to go into the ACP is different for people that are already ETCs. They already have established that versus the ones that are not ETCs. So maybe talk about it. It's more streamlined if you're already an ETC, correct?
That is a correct statement. Yes. Yes. And if you are an ETC, there is an election form that gets completed. You will, regardless if you're an ETC or not, but normally you would have an FRN, a funding request number from the FCC, a DUNS number, which is a Dun & Bradstreet number. And some companies, whether they're an ETC or not, will have what we call a sam.gov account.
Right.
And this is through the Treasury. And so this is how they will receive their reimbursement.
Correct.
And Lifeline does not do it that way. They do that back onto their USAC statement on a monthly basis. So that's one of the differences. But ETCs would probably have these. They fill out the form. They put in the information as far as the service offerings that they're going to provide. They show that they are an ETC in their state. And we can always get those certifications if they can't find those, because those have to be certified annually anyway. And we submit the form to USAC. We wait. USAC sends a response back that basically would say, we've received your election. It's been successful. Your next email will provide you with a new SAC, what we call a study area code. And you will get a new study area code for the ACP program. Once you get that, USAC loads that into your Lifeline into the NLAD system, and basically you're off and running just like you would be with Lifeline.
And the NLAD is that national database of eligibility, correct?
Yes, stands for National Lifeline Accountability Database. Okay. Yes.
And that's to make sure people don't sign up for Lifeline through their cell phone company and through their telephone company.
That's correct. You cannot do that. It's one per household. And when a subscriber chooses to participate in Lifeline or ACP, there's a website that they will go to, and they have to set up an account, and they'll go through the process through what we call the National Verifier, or NV, and they'll get an email back that tells them that they've been accepted into the program, and then they would forward that on to their service provider, and then they can get them enrolled. So,
excellent.
Yes.
So, but again, these are all pieces that you guys can walk through with that.
Absolutely.
People have the administrative capacity at their company to do that.
Absolutely.
Resources out there to help with that. And then there's additional step for the non-ETCs, right?
That is correct. And so a non-ETC, there's an additional form that has to be completed on the FCC website and approved through the FCC. Okay. And once you complete that process and it's been approved through the FCC, you'll get an email back from the FCC that tells you that it's been approved. Then you'll take that information, and the election form that the ETC does is the same form as a non-ETC.
Okay.
There's a couple other check marks and things that you need to provide. And obviously the email from the FCC that you've been pre-approved. Enter your service plans and submit it. And basically you wait to hear from them. And once again, you'll get a study area code. And it's just, once again, like I previously stated, it's a little bit of a learning curve as to how to get everything set up into the system, and understand what needs to be done, and make sure who's going to certify, who's going to file the claims, those types of things. But just one extra step there for a non-ETC.
Excellent. Well, being in the broadband business is a constant learning curve, so everybody should be accustomed to that.
Absolutely.
And some of those tasks that you outlined are really one-time things. They have to do it up front, and then it's done. Your SAM.gov account is just you've got your done number. All these other things are
absolutely. The thing that's recurring is the filing of the monthly claim,
Mhm.
and to get your reimbursement.
Gotcha.
That is not painful. That's not a painful process at all. It's just has to be done on a monthly basis. Otherwise,
Sure.
you don't get your reimbursement through the Treasury.
Now, does that differ than Lifeline? Isn't Lifeline like a quarterly reimbursement, or is it also
It
monthly?
used to be quarterly
Okay.
many years ago, but it is.
I'm,
Yeah,
I'm aging myself here.
I
Back in
am
the
doing
day.
this, Curtis. Yes. No, it is a monthly process. Right now, Lifeline's due by the 8th of the month, and ACP's due by the 15th, but you can submit it earlier. You don't need to, wait till the 15th to submit it. If you want it, if you're an ETC and have Lifeline, you can submit your Lifeline, and then turn around and go right in and do your ACP. You'll just get your reimbursement a little sooner through the Treasury on your ACP.
Okay. That's usually like an ACH payment.
Yes, whatever bank account you direct to on your sam.gov account is the bank account that it will go into. Yes.
Excellent. So no handling checks.
No handling checks. They do not do checks.
That's good. That saves one more administrative
Absolutely.
piece of the puzzle.
Yes.
So a couple of questions about from the provider's perspective here.
Okay.
The subsidy is $30 a month. My understanding is the consumer gets to choose whichever tier of service to apply that to. In other words, and correct me if I'm wrong, let's say the provider's got a $50 a month tier and it's 50 megabits per second download, the consumer can choose that. But the consumer could also say, no, I'm going to apply that $30 a month toward the $100 gigabit tier. Is that correct?
Yes. Any of the plans that or service offerings that a service provider has, the subscriber can choose whichever one of those they'd like to participate in. One thing when the payments are getting applied to the end user's plan, if they're a Lifeline provider, they're probably signed up under the broadband piece of the Lifeline, which is the $9.25 a month for the broadband.
Right. Yep.
Okay. That $9.25 gets applied to the broadband, but then the $30 up to $30 would get applied. So the Lifeline always gets applied first. So let's just say the broadband is $30 for their plan. You apply the $9.25, then the difference between the $30 and the $9.25 will get applied because you apply more than the cost of the broadband. And Lifeline always gets applied first.
That was one of my next questions. Is this a combo? Can you combine your Lifeline credit and your ACP credit? And it sounds like you can.
Yes, you can. It is a combo. Yes. But obviously you would need to be signed up for Lifeline.
You have to be an ETC. Yeah. And that's a process that, again, you guys can certainly facilitate for a provider if they're not already. And probably 90% of the small independent providers, municipals, telcos, that sort of thing, that are involved with CBAN probably are already ETCs, but there are a few that maybe haven't done that because they didn't see the value proposition, and maybe this is it.
Yes.
Maybe this is now I can bring $9.25 plus $30 into my community from outside sources and enable my eligible customers to get better broadband. So
absolutely, yes.
Now, is a provider allowed to have a tier of service that only ACP members can get? I didn't want to stump you there, but I could.
Yeah, you did a little bit. Sorry.
It seems to me that some providers are doing that. They're saying, and I'm talking not independent, I'm talking the big guys are doing that and say, we created this new tier. It's, 30 meg down and 5 meg up, and it's $30 a month. But the only people that can get it are people who are in the ACP, and therefore it's a wash. That customer essentially gets free internet. I wasn't sure if that's something that I don't believe it's allowed in certain states under the law for municipal providers to do because of the whole rate discrimination thing. But that may be something that would be of interest if it is allowed for some small operators.
Well, you have to be careful. And this is I'm gonna answer your question, but I'm gonna kind of go around it a little bit because
that's okay. I do that all the time. So that's fine.
You've got to make sure that your broadband subscriber, their broadband needs are being met. So if they need it for homeschooling or telehealth, those types of things, and you're not offering a speed that's going to allow them to do that, no, you can't do that.
Right.
So you have to be careful when you're basically upselling or downselling, and obviously initially promoting that to the subscriber to make sure that what they're going to use that internet for is going to be enough bandwidth for them. So you got to be cautious with it. So I can't say yes and no. You just have to be very careful that you are meeting those subscriber requirements of what they need. We kind of had that question with another service provider that we were working with. Kind of the same thing. Well, can we just put a plan together for that situation? I told them that, and they went, no, we're not going to do that now. It's probably not be enough bandwidth for, if they want to stream and the kids are at home, working for doing schoolwork or looking for a job or, whatever. Yeah, got to be careful with it.
Because the benefit is not specific to one purpose like education or work from home. It is for all uses by that household. And
that is correct.
You can't really say, hey, we'll give you a lower cost internet, but you can only use it for schoolwork and you can only use it for this.
Right.
No, it's got to be an unfettered service, and it has to be, able to meet the needs.
Absolutely.
And that definition of what's good enough is a tough one to come up with, right? Because here we have the FCC with a definition of 25 megabits per second down and 3 up, and they say that's broadband. And the average consumer may just chuckle when they hear that because it's obviously not doing the job for them. So
exactly,
providers probably would need to do a little soul searching if they took that approach, or they just say anybody that's eligible can get whatever tier they want, and it's going to be a $30 credit on their bill, and the provider is whole, the customer is happier, and we all move on. So
absolutely, that is correct.
I imagine there are going to be some providers out there that get really cute with this.
Sure.
Not CBAN providers, because they actually live and work and care about their communities. But some of the big guys are going to get really cute with this, and they'll be some providers that get a little hand slapped for that.
Yep. I would agree with that.
So if we have a provider that's out there watching this right now, Renee, I'm going to put your website up here on the. Give you a little plug. Obviously, there are other people and companies that do this, but you're the one that's taken time out of your day to talk about it. And you're also, Consortia is also a CBAN member. And so we appreciate that. So here's the web address for Consortia Consulting. You can reach out to them. I assume everybody's contact information is on there, Renee. So
yes, it is. Yes.
Great. So, there'll be more about this to come. I'm sure this program will evolve over the years. And maybe we'll have you back at some point.
That would be great.
Especially as I sit back and think about all the questions I didn't think of during our conversation.
Yeah. And we are getting lots of questions. So
I bet. Well, you keep that list going and you keep answering them. And next time we get together, we'll compare notes. Okay.
Sounds great. Thanks, Curtis.
You bet. Well, our guest today here on CBAN Lunch and Learn has been Renee Knoop. She's with Consortia Consulting. We've been talking about the American Connectivity Program from the provider's perspective. Again, we really want to thank Renee Knoop with Consortia Consulting for talking to us about the Affordable Connectivity Program. I wanted to just cap off that interview with a little discussion about why providers should participate in the ACP. I think it's really important, especially for the community-focused providers that are part of the CBAN team, part of the organization and members. There are a number of reasons why I think it's important that community-based providers participate in this ACP. Number one, your competitors are participating. So if you aren't participating in a program, your competitors are, and your competitors use the participation and that difference between you and them to attract customers. Those customers are people that will probably leave your system and become customer of your competitor. So if you look at the competitors, we're talking both landline and wireless, because the ACP can apply to a wireless data package as well. So not doing so, you are putting yourself at competitive risk. Number two, much more altruistic reason, your customers need this. There are eligible households in every community that you serve, and those eligible households may be getting internet today, but they may really be straining to cover that cost along with the other costs it takes to run your household. So your customers in need of this, and as the community-focused and community-based provider, you should be the one to bring them that and fill that need for them. And finally, it's free money. It's coming from the federal government, flowing through you to your customer. And therefore, this is money that is not going to come to your community unless a provider participates. And I think it's important to not just participate in it on paper, but promote it deeply within your community. Your customers love you. Your customers will listen to you. And if you tell them this is available and encourage them to participate if they're eligible, they're going to listen to you and they will participate. Renee did a good job of outlining the ACP and how providers can participate. I would send you to this URL, the USAC, and you will be able to find out more information about how to participate. That website contains kind of a step-by-step of what a provider needs to do to participate in the Affordable Connectivity Program if you're not already participating. And this is regardless of whether you are already an eligible telecommunication carrier, or ETC. As Renee mentioned, if you are, then you're already one step ahead. If you're not, you don't have to become an ETC to participate in this program. And there's just another step you'll have to do. Yeah, there's going to be a little work involved. But again, let's think about the benefit back to the people that you are serving. They are the ones that will benefit from this. If it's a little administrative work for you, or if you need to spend a little money to hire a company like Consortia to help you with it, in the end, you're really doing the right thing for your customers. So I'd encourage all of our providers out there to participate in the ACP, and certainly reach out to the folks at Consortia Consulting if you are needing that help. Thank you to Renee Knoop from Consortia Consulting for participating in today's discussion of the ACP from the provider standpoint. Thank you to my co-founders of CBAN, Todd Kilkoff and John Ann Willow. And we'll see you next time here on our CBAN